Hello, bonjour, namaste, ni hao, and ohio, everybody. What is going on? It is Gale here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel once again for another Danmachi Fulland of Water and Light video. And today we are here with the story review. Finally, a full-on spoiler story review for the game, of course. I know that a lot of you guys have been probably waiting for this one. Of course, it's one of the more interesting aspects of the game. And I think the one aspect of the game that I think everybody is looking forward to and is everybody's, interested in quite a bit, even more so than the gameplay and stuff, of course, right? And so I'm very excited to talk about it. I'm very much looking forward to discussing it with you guys in the comment section of this video, and also just generally talking about it throughout this video as well. So of course, if you guys go on to enjoy it, remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, all that sort of good stuff. And like I said, in the comment section down below, put your thoughts in. I want to see what you guys have to say about the story as well. If you guys watched it, you played it, whatever it may be, let me know your thoughts. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Now, I've had the opportunity to actually reread the story once more, of course, right? Thanks to, of course, taking a little bit more time to make this video. I had a, quick reread of the story, basically, thanks to, of course, the story being easily accessible. Once you're done with the game, you can just immediately, go through the library section in game and actually check out the entire story for yourself. And I had the opportunity to do so, right? I had the opportunity to do so, and honestly, I have even more thoughts than I did, of course, before doing that reread. So I can't wait to get into it. Now, before I also go ahead and talk about anything in regards to the story, a quick thing to note is that I obviously made a video before the game released, about a week or two before the game released, and that was a preview to, of course, Fulland of Water and Light. It basically gave us a bit of insight into the personalities of Fulland and Belinda, and also their past before they got to the point where they met Dine for the very first time, and the whole story kick-started, basically, right? It is very important that and I highly recommend people actually go and read that preview as well. And I really would have liked to also have the opportunity to read the short story that Omori Sensei wrote for the limited edition version of the game as well, because that is also a thing, that we had the limited edition of the game, right, where there was a short story attached to it. And I would have loved to have read it as well, because I feel like it would just enhance my story experience of the game even more. Because honestly, I think personally for me, having read the preview, my thoughts on Belinda, Fulland, and everything that happened in the story is quite a bit different to other people as a result of that. So I highly urge you guys, go check out that preview that I made, and there is a link in that video too, of course, for you guys to read the preview by yourselves. You don't need me to kind of read through it on, entirely. You guys can read it yourselves. But yeah, it's something I would highly recommend. It is something I would highly recommend. Now, let's go on with the actual story of Fulland of Water and Light. Let's start off with the actual story, and let's talk about the very beginning, basically, because the beginning of the story, the first act, is effectively putting everything on how Belle and Co basically get embroiled in this story, effectively in the story of Fulland of Water and Light, of course, right? And to be honest, the start was fairly interesting, fairly unbelievable, of course, right? Because even when we got to know about the premise of the story a year ago, right, when the game was announced, the idea of Aurario being underwater and everything, it was absolutely a huge surprise, right? And of course, it was the same thing here. Getting into the story, the way it was set up, right, we knew that the coffin of Dine in Fulland's temple was going to be the critical point, right? And that was exactly what happened. So basically, at the start of the story, we had a couple of thieves in a brand new town that we actually have never heard of, I don't think. I don't remember it ever being mentioned like Danmimo or Sword or Otoria, and that's usually where these extra places like Melon, Telskura, and stuff like that get shown off for the very first time, right? Verla is a brand new place that we've never heard of, and we saw some thieves infiltrating a museum in that location trying to steal stuff. Now, things happen. They're transported somehow from Verla to Fulland's temple near Melon, and effectively what ends up happening is that in the investigation process with Belle and everybody, and when I say Belle and everybody, that includes Belle, the Hestia Familia themselves, everybody from the Hestia Familia, Ryu, Seer, and Horn. Now, you might be wondering why Seer and Horn are there. Seer was brought along because of it being involved with Fulland's temple, and Horn came along with Seer because she is, Seer's attendant, basically, or Freya's attendant. Remember that this story does take place after the events of season 5. That's actually going to be quite important for a point I'm going to be making in just a second. But along with all of these guys as well, we get to see Eyes as well. Now, Eyes apparently is in the location because of a limited edition potato popper. Shock horror, she's out hunting for them amazing potato popper deals, of course, right? It's a bit of it's not a surprise there. It's not a surprise there. But what is a surprise is Eyes' presence there. Because, like I said, I was going to talk about why it's a bit weird for Eyes to be here. And the reason why it's a bit weird for Eyes to be here is because canonically, Belle and Eyes did not meet for a while. This is a little bit spoilery for volume 19, you could say, but it's not too a major spoiler necessarily. You guys remember that at the end of episode 15 in season 5, right? When I'm talking about the anime, we spoke a little bit about how Eyes was cheering on Belle a lot and stuff like that in the light novel, and it wasn't adapted in the anime, right? Well, turns out that, of course, while she was cheering extremely loudly in volume 18 or episode 15 of season 5, she lost her voice. And because of she lost her voice and fell a little bit sick, she could not meet Belle for a while. That was the idea at the start of volume 19, basically. And that's the only spoiler I'm going to give, if anything. And it's not even a major spoiler necessarily. So it is a little bit off in that sense. I think this is a classic Amori thing of like it being a little bit wrong, or maybe he forgot, or maybe he wanted to ignore it, and this is more of a non-canonical route kind of thing, basically. Whatever the case may be, if we are talking about the canonicity of this story, it's a little bit mudded because of that point, really. Again, it's not impossible that it could have happened, but it's unlikely because of that just one mere point of Eyes' presence being a thing, basically, because it just wasn't a thing. Belle had not met Eyes for a little bit, for a couple of weeks at that point, basically, at the start of volume 19. So that's the idea, basically, and that's the point I wanted to make on the canonicity of this story, is that it's unlikely for the story to have taken place, but there is it's not an impossibility that it could have taken place a little bit later. But then you would have had to deal with other various factors as well, such as the school district and all that sort of stuff. So again, it's a bit tricky in this situation to verify the canonicity. Verify the fact that the story is canon. Goddamn English, man. Fuck English. It's a difficult language, okay? But yeah, it's difficult to verify that the story is canon. Again, this is all on Amori. If he wants to make the story canon, by all means, he can do the same. I do wonder if they decided to avoid Eyes from screaming in the anime now because of the game's released. I would be kind of disappointed in the decision-making side of things on that part, because that's not on JC staff. Then that's somebody higher up saying you can't do this because we need Eyes in this next part, and you can't have Eyes' voice, go out, and that whole situation happen. So making the anime a different timeline in a way, I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one in that sense. Again, this is just my thoughts coming to play when it comes to the canonicity of the storyline and everything. But anyways, so yeah, basically this is the group that's present in Fulland's temple. Belle decides to open up the coffin. He's not watched The Mummy, clearly. You shouldn't open coffins, kids. You shouldn't open coffins. But he did open Dine's coffin, and water just starts pouring out, and somehow the scene is set up, basically, at that point. The scene is set, effectively. We are in an underwater Orario scenario, basically. Orario is underwater, and our heroes have been split up. Belle's been split up. Belle is with Horn for now. Eyes is with Hestia. And that's the situation. The story from that point onwards in the first act is pretty much a continuous back and forth between Eyes and Belle. Basically, it jumps between Eyes and Belle, and also between the present and the past, as both Eyes and Belle have obtained weapons that are basically the only weapons that can defeat these monsters. And so Eyes and Belle are your main attacking sort of characters, the characters that are effectively defeating the monsters. But because these weapons, when you defeat a boss, the weapons would basically absorb the enemies and effectively provide them with the memory of the past, where we get to see Fulland Belinda and Dine's experiences, basically. Now, this is where I will say from the first act transitioning into the second act and the second act as a whole, I feel like that could have been a lot stronger. This is the weakest point, in my opinion, when it comes to the story, because I feel like the second act could have been way more action packed, and or one of the two, it could have been either more action packed or it should have involved itself more in the story. The best way to describe it is that it felt like we were just getting snippets of moments, but that's all we were getting, just snippets. We never really fully got the experience of the past. In the past, we'd get a couple of lines and then we'd be dragged into the present again. We never really got the idea of how Fulland and Dine's, abilities work together, Belinda's doubts and her issues. And then in the present timeline as well, with Belle and Eyes as well, we'd get a quick, couple of lines in terms of their response to the, memory. Of course, I felt like as the story progressed and as we got more deeper into the more interesting and the more twisted sections of the memories, you could say, Belle's response to the memories were a lot better, but it felt like it was just very basic for the most part in the early part of the second act, basically. The mid portion definitely could have had some major improvements. Like I said in my game review as a whole, this section could have used a lot of moments in the past where we're playing as maybe Fulland, to be quite honest. It could have done so well, because what you could have done is have Fulland as the attacking unit, or, just like how we are playable with Belle and Eyes, make Fulland the playable character and have Dine and Belinda as the assists or something, and you do super well there, basically. We would have had a fantastic experience in that situation. And also what that could have done as well is it could have allowed us to, one, extend the gameplay element of the game as well, but also along with that as well, we could have also had more story to experience in the past as well, which would have been fantastic as well. Again, we would have interacted more with the characters, in all honesty. That is something I wish we could have had. Again, it's nice what we got. I think as a basis and as getting an idea of what the characters are and everything, it was solid, but it felt like there was just so much more that could have been done as well. And I feel like it's not necessarily, you could argue it is actually missing. I was gonna say it's not really lacking, but it is actually, in my opinion. I do think you are missing those critical points. It's a thing, but it feels like you need to know more, kind of thing. You need to get yourself more involved with the story, and it feels like that's what's missing in the second act. And that's in my opinion, of course. That is in my opinion. But saying that, from the second act and when we're transitioning into the third act, it was great, in my opinion. It was great. We were already getting small hints towards something being amiss when it comes to the story. You could tell that Eyes was also really questioning a couple of things. And of course, by then, Eyes had met up with, of course, Eyes and Hestia, I should say, had met up with Ryu and Mikoto. They were also, starting to be suspicious about certain things, especially Ryu in this case, with her past experiences. Belle and Horn had met up with Lily and Welf, of course, right, on the other side, and then they got together, and then we find out that Hestia was never there whatsoever, of course, right? Hestia was Belinda all along, basically, an illusion of Belinda, or Belinda had used Hestia as an illusion, effectively. And that was great. And it was really smart to have Hestia paired up with Eyes, Mikoto, and Ryu, because those are the three that have interacted with her the least, arguably. Lily and Belle probably would have noticed immediately, more so Belle than Lily. Well, obviously also had a chance, but because of the amount of time that, Eyes, Ryu, and Mikoto have spent with Hestia, very little time, in fact, it works extremely well in that situation. So it was a very good twist and a very smart decision by Amori to have put Hestia with that gang rather than the other gang. It was very, very well done in that sense. And then we find out that Orario isn't actually underwater. They're actually trapped in a sort of walled garden, which again is very good timing for something going on in the light novels. Again, if you know, you know. But it's super well done in that sense because it gives us more insight into what's happening in the light novels right now, which I might make it as a separate video as well, talking about that as well. But I think it was extremely well done with the twist and everything. Now, along with that as well, we got a full blown explanation of exactly what happened in the past with Belinda's manipulation of DNA effectively, and how she was effectively cursed in a way. Basically, she managed to get a hold of a cursed object that fell from the sky with the power of a potential god. Now, this happened suddenly. So effectively what happened was, of course, Fulland had chosen Dine in this love triangle between Dine, Fulland, and Belinda. And of course, Belinda saw that. Belinda went a little bit crazy because she's been so affectionate. She's been in love with Fulland for so long. She's Fulland's fiance, for God's sakes, right? And in this sudden, like, sort of like hurt and pain, an object falls in front of her from the sky, effectively. And obviously she picks it up in her, hurt and pain and everything. And obviously, this object has some power that effectively manipulates her to bring out as much hate out as possible, basically. Now, I have some theories as to this goblet, this grail, effectively, that fell out of the sky. A lot of people may have assumed that it might have been one of the goddess of loves, or goddess of beauties, I should say, that did it, because I think one of the lines from Lily was that, oh, the power of this grail to manipulate and kind of control people is it's got to be a goddess of beauty, basically, right? And I think that is very possible that it could have been a goddess of beauty. But I believe, personally, to me, based on the fact that it's a object meant to influence chaos, there's only one god that I know who could have done it, and it's a god that we all know from Sword Art Oratoria, a god that thrives in chaos, has been wanting chaos for a very, very long time, and has been manipulating Aurario towards that chaos as well. And that is, of course, Dionysus, or Enyo. I really do think that this god that dropped the goblet to Belinda, or the grail to Belinda, I should say more specifically, is, in my opinion, I think it was Dionysus all along. Because the thing is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a goddess of beauty to charm everybody. And I know, obviously, with the strength it has, it is potentially goddess of beauty for sure. There's no doubt it is. There is a possibility of that, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it is Dionysus, in my opinion. That's just the thought process that I have, at least when it comes to that scenario. That's my personal headcanon, if you want to call it that. Now, we move on to the third act, of course, right? The transition has happened. We know that effectively at this point, Belinda is evil, you could say, right? I say you could say she is evil at this point to the viewer, and she's taken away Belle because she wants to convert Belle into becoming Fulland, basically. And from this point onwards, the third act becomes very tightly packed, but extremely well done as well. There is a lot more complexity added to all three characters, Belinda, Dina, and Fulland, but they're also kept relatively simple. I know a lot of people may feel like Belinda becoming good was a bit necessary, but I think it was actually something that made the story better, because it was never about Belinda being evil. It was all about the Grail making her evil, you could say, or bringing out that hate to make her do evil things, right? Again, everybody has a little bit of a hate in their lives, especially we know this in Danmachi. It's especially true because the only pure soul that we know, at least in the present timeline, let's take it for example, is Belle. Of course, during the Age of Heroes, I'm pretty sure there would have been the likes of, you could argue, Argonaut, the likes of Albert, and so on and so forth, that could have been pure souls as well. But right now, we know that the only pure soul in Aurario and just generally the world is Belle. Everybody has a little bit of hate or potential evil in their hearts, you could say, right? And so I feel like that idea was at least carried on into this story. And of course, the Grail was the big problem here. Now, on top of that, what we do know is that Belinda never wanted to, forcefully turn Belle into Fulland necessarily if she had any other choice, but she wanted to do it because she was trying to rectify her sins. The fact that she basically in indirectly killed Dine and of course left Fulland in pain for so long, right? So her whole objective was to resurrect Fulland, be it using Belle as a vessel, to get Fulland together with Dine. Again, however, this is where I will go back to my point in the second act, and this is where I will go back to the second act and say, I think there should have been more time and detail spent in the past, especially because they're new characters. So obviously giving them more time would have helped massively. The preview in this case helped me a lot because it kind of made me feel like I was right in the way I judged Belinda's personality in the preview, because obviously coming into this and then finding out she's evil, I'm like, oh shit, wait, did I read the preview wrong? Because it never felt like Belinda was necessarily a bad character. She was a character that wanted to help people. Of course, she had Fulland always on her mind, but she always was trying to help people. That was, she was the saint because she wanted to help people and stuff like that. And it felt like, of course, I felt like I was led astray, but then, coming to the end and then learning what she was actually trying to achieve, her goal, it felt like, yeah, the preview was actually in line with what I was feeling. And it was the same thing with even Fulland as well. So it's the reason why the preview actually helped me a lot, because it gave me more of an impact personally to me, with the twist, of course, that happened where she turned evil basically. But then the ending in the third act, of course, made it feel like we were back to effectively falling in line with what Belinda's character actually is. So yeah, like I said, I think the second act definitely needed a lot of time in the past to be able to give us a little more feel and a little bit more understanding on the new characters. That's what I would say definitely was needed. But otherwise, the third act, super well done. Really liked Belinda's arc as well, the arrival of Fulland, Dine, the way they rectified themselves, and sort of came to an understanding equally between all three of them as to how much they love each other. And overall, it was great. It was very, very solid. I really enjoyed the ending of the story. Overall, when it comes to the main story, right, I feel like it was done extremely well, with the nice moments, with some unexpected moments, and then some great icebreaker scenes as well, with comedic moments, some banter between characters, be it from the ad-libs of Haruhime Lily, Ai's airheadness as well, and her bouncing off of like Mikoto and Hestia, or Horn's bipolar disorder and Belle's just absolute fear of her. They were all very well done. But again, I think, as I mentioned in previous videos, and I mentioned I think multiple times in this video, all we needed was just that stronger second act with more time spent in the past. And we could have actually also gotten just a longer game as well. I know a lot of people feel like this game was a little bit short. The story itself is about 4 hours long, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it is around 4 hours long, based on how much how long it took me to do the reread. I think it was around 4 hours. I think, adding those things would have easily added at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, in my opinion, based on those two changes alone. And then, of course, you add in potentially some stages where you can play as Fulland in the past. That would have added more gameplay hours as a whole as well. Overall, I think this is, with those changes, I think this could have been easily one of the best Danmachi stories, period. Nonetheless, it is still a very solid effort from Omori, and it's definitely very much appreciated after the 1.5 years of Dan Crow stories that we've been getting. 110%, no doubt about it. To cap it off as well, I want to quickly talk about the sub-scenarios as well, because they were also a thing in the story, those mini moments you could, find across the map between all these characters. And honestly, I felt they were all very solid, but in particular, the Horn ones were amazing. But the ones that I found that were my personal favorite, the ones that I found that were going to be my favorite, and I was surprised those were my favorite, were the ones involving Aiz and Mikoto. They are such a rare combination in terms of characters. It's not two characters you necessarily see together, and obviously the sub-scenarios were used for that purpose. So to see those characters together and getting them to interact and talk and have a small moment was amazing to see. Honestly, it was so nice to see. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say regarding the entire story. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, of course, right? Please be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Like I said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Until then, take it easy, everybody. Bye bye.